Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join our Exclusive Networks webinar. My name is Chris Panaris, and I'm the marketing manager here at Exclusive Networks. As you already know, today we'll be talking to you about how you can unlock the power of Fortinet's secure SD-WAN solution. But before we get into that, like always, I want to take a couple of minutes to inform any newcomers joining us today about how Exclusive Networks can add value to your business. What makes Exclusive Networks unique is that we specialize in cybersecurity and cloud market space, maintaining specialization within a narrow set of vendors. Exclusive Networks assist the channel community with vendor-specific and generic training, sales, design, implementation, and of course, supply chain logistics. Our offering is filling the void by helping value-add resellers and managed service providers supply relevant multi-vendor solutions to their end users. For the month of March, we've been hosting quizzes focused on our awesome vendor Fortinet. These quizzes consist of 10 questions, some of which are answered in our TGIF webinars and this webinar as well. You can answer all 10 questions correctly and you could win $100 Amazon gift card. The first one is concluded, but the second one is still available if you want to try your luck. The third quiz will be available on Monday, March 30th, so make sure you're following us on LinkedIn and Twitter so you don't miss out when the quiz is made available. And our speaker today is Juan Quintero. He is one of our sales engineers here at Exclusive Networks, and he is based out of our beautiful Miami sales office. So now it's time to unlock the power of SD-WAN. Take it away, Juan.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today in this unprecedented time that we are experiencing. So today's episode comes to you from an office entirely empty. I'm the only one here in the Miami office. And we're going to talk about SD-WAN. So this is a bunker cast edition of TGIF. So this is the agenda. When I do these presentations, I kind of like to do them as a story. So I like to begin from, as from the very bottom. So some of this context may be already very well known to, I expect actually for it to be very well known for most of you guys. So I apologize if it's a little redundant at the beginning. But I do want to hit on some of these points because this event is also going to be recorded and it's going to be referenced and leveraged by maybe folks that are not as experienced as some of the people in our audience. After the slides, we have about 15 of those. We're going to have a walkthrough of the SD-WAN configuration on a FortiGate. The very first portion of it is actually pre-recorded because while doing that, there is a chance you may lose the connection, so I don't want to do that live. And then after that short video, then we'll pick it up live and go through some of the steps together. So this is kind of how everything came to be. So, we start with SDN or software defined network. And essentially, I'm not going to read everything that's here. The context is also here so that, for different reasons. Number one, again, because these events are recorded and people can watch it later and pause and actually read the content. And also because we make the slides available to our partners so that then you can make it available to your customers if you wish, and they can also read the content. But essentially, software defined networking, like the picture illustrates down at the bottom, it decouples the data from the control. So in the very, very old days, you essentially had to have people on site where the appliance was to configure and manage those appliances a lot of the times one at a time. Through the introduction of APIs, essentially, you have now where you can manage appliances from anywhere, and you can set up rules and configurations that affect not just one appliance, but multiple appliances, and you can push them out at the same time. So before we get to the next slide about SD-WAN and management, I do want to talk about MPLS because MPLS is a huge player and a huge topic when you are talking about SD-WAN. A lot of people, when SD-WAN was first introduced, they say, oh, this is going to replace MPLS. We're not going to have MPLS in a few years. Personally, I think that they're both going to play a role for the foreseeable future. But each of these offerings drastically affects the other one. And what I mean by that is that when there was just MPLS, and that's illustrated by this little capture here, essentially, when you're the only player in the space, you can pretty much set your own market, right? So MPLS is traditionally pretty expensive. Also, when MPLS was at the height of its might, the way that things were configured, it was for hubs or branches to funnel traffic to a main location where all the services were hosted. And therefore, it made sense to have a dedicated line that would be able to offer you a really high service level agreement for availability. And then that way, all the hubs could communicate with the central location. So did you guys know that MPLS is actually a technique and not a service? But because MPLS is costly, it was adopted by the ISPs, and then it is now sold as a service. And then I have this little sentence here about, for those of you who may not be familiar, which I doubt there are many, with MPLS, I have the analogy about ordering a package online. Back in the day, you would order something and you would go in there and track the status of where it is, and you would see that the package originated from New York. And next thing you know, 2 days later, halfway through, the package is in Texas on its way to Miami. And you're saying, well, why is it doing it in Texas? That's not the best way. Well, before MPLS, essentially, each of the points, and by points, I mean the networking appliances in a path from source and destination, didn't really know the entire route. They just knew the next point. So when traffic packets arrived at that networking appliance, that appliance had to make a decision, usually a router, on the fly of what to send it next. So then you would get a scenario kind of like the one in the analogy about ordering something from the mail. And then MPLS basically established a predetermined route, a highly efficient route. So essentially it says, if you are ordering something from New York and you're in Miami, the package is coming down I-95 because that's the best way. Now, move forward a few years, and now everybody is moving to SaaS services and SaaS applications. So the model on the left is no longer true. You're accessing cloud applications directly, and look at what's happening now. Everybody is working from home, and a lot of us are accessing things like Office 365, NetSuite, Salesforce, and things like that. So it is no longer feasible, and it's very expensive to funnel that traffic from not only just the branch, but from the remote worker's location to a central hub, just so that it can go out to the internet. I mean, I can understand if you're accessing corporate data that it's hosted in the corporate location, but if you're just accessing the internet, that is very counterproductive and very expensive. So that's why I said that while I don't feel that SD-WAN is going to replace MPLS, it's going to drastically affect the playing field, because essentially what's happening is that organizations are rethinking what they're doing and saying, okay, what do we really need to send through the MPLS circuit? Let's do that. And then do we need a backup MPLS circuit, or can we just get SD-WAN because it's a backup? The backup is there in case of an emergency, and we're probably not really going to send critical applications through that circuit anyway. So why not save on cost and use and deploy SD-WAN? And also, and that goes into the next slide, there is a lot of flexibility, and your ability to get up and running with SD-WAN is a lot better than with traditional MPLS dedicated circuits, because usually dedicated circuits would need dedicated hardware. And you couldn't centrally manage those dedicated hardwares because they were essentially different. Whereas with SD-WAN, particularly with Fortinet SD-WAN, you can have one device that is multi-purpose that can be managed from the cloud. If you have a multi-location project, you can have something like FortiManager where you can manage, and we'll see that later, multiple locations in reference to not only just SD-WAN, but general purpose management from one single pane of glass. So the ability to get up and running quicker, the flexibility is much better with SD-WAN. Also, there's another aspect of it, which is that because MPLS is controlled by the ISP, when there is a problem, you rely on the ISP to fix it. you don't have the ability to change customizations to get an optimum, to fix things. You just got to open up a ticket with the ISP and hope that they make true on the SLA that they sold you when you signed the contract. So here are some of the advantages of SD-WAN. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but obviously the first one is very apparent. Again, I'm not going to write something like replacing MPLS. No, but it definitely drastically changes the way that you think about MPLS. So you can definitely reduce MPLS costs with SD-WAN. Simplification of branch office networks. And we're going to see about the advantages of putting SD-WAN at the edge of your network with Fortinet. And it speaks directly to this. But essentially and generally, going back to the previous slides, it's a lot easier to get up and running because you don't need dedicated hardware for different circuits, especially with Fortinet. Improving performance with SD-WAN. So personally, it boggles my mind that in some areas of the US, we're still talking about 25 megabits, 50 megabits per second. So if you're a business and you're trying to offer some services and you want to reach out to your clients, it's going to be very difficult for you to do that when you're working with those speeds, right? So what do? Well, you go to the cloud, and the cloud is great, and it's scalable, and it's flexible, and it's always available, but the cloud is expensive, and some of the businesses may not have the budget to do that. So an alternative would be in those areas, you can aggregate multiple ISPs and get enough bandwidth so that you can now host services that your clients can leverage. And that's definitely a math worth doing. And the final piece, and that's one that we're gonna kind of talk more about as we progress to this webinar, is security. And security is a big, I wanna say, obstacle with some of the pure SD-WAN vendors, because they're dedicated to SD-WAN, so security is not in their nature. So if you're not doing security with SD-WAN, then you have to either do SD-WAN internally, so only a portion of your network benefits from it, or you expose your SD-WAN appliance, that's not the best case. And to illustrate that, I have this slide, and now I've had this slide in every webinar that I've done for the past 3 weeks. And I get the question about, what is Fortinet's play in SD-WAN? Well, Fortinet's play in SD-WAN is very simple. Consolidate technologies and offer secure SD-WAN with Fortinet. And if we look at what's happening here on the left, you have two scenarios. You have the scenario where I first had one ISP, so I had one security device, and then I decided to get an SD-WAN appliance. Because I'm at the edge, I cannot expose the SD-WAN appliance, so I'm going to get a second security appliance for the second ISP, and then I have the SD-WAN appliance after that. And then in this scenario, yes, all the network behind that will benefit from the SD-WAN solution, but this is very cost prohibitive. You're dealing probably or possibly with 3 different technology vendors, and from a management perspective, you now may not be able to have a single pane of glass because everybody has their own cloud. So scenario here, number 2 on the bottom is the opposite. So you say, okay, I'm going to expose my SD-WAN appliance. So wait, I can't do that. That's not going to work. So, okay, rethink that. Let me just pick and choose what are the most critical applications that need SD-WAN, and then I'm going to deploy SD-WAN internally. So essentially, you have a data center, and 1/10 or 1/5 of your network benefits from SD-WAN, whereas the rest of your network does not. So Fortinet comes along and says, no, don't do that, because both of those scenarios, in the long run, they're counterproductive, they're counterintuitive, and they're just not cost effective. So why not do secured SD-WAN? So you're doing which, by the way, SD-WAN has nothing to do with security. SD-WAN is a quality of service and is a WAN optimization feature. But if you're doing it on the same box where you're also filtering and securing your traffic, you're now dealing with one technology vendor, you're dealing with one single pane of glass management. So, and you can put it at the edge, so now your entire network benefits from SD-WAN. So this table I got from one of the Fortinet latest presentations about the SD-WAN playing field. And by all means, take this with a grain of salt, like I do, because the minute you put a table like this out there, one of your competitors releases a new feature that makes this table, no longer 100% accurate, right? So, but it does illustrate some of the pain points that I was talking about. A lot of the pure SD-WAN vendors, they are pure SD-WAN vendors, but they don't offer any security features. So you need to couple that with a security solution. This is actually one of my favorite slides for this presentation. And I'm sure that a lot of you looked at Gartner. Those who are decision makers, in my experience, they leverage Gartner quite a lot. But have you looked at these two magic quadrants together? So I recently was looking at them separately, and then I started looking at that, and I realized this is the next gen firewall, and the other one is the WAN edge. So that's where the SD-WAN players would be. If you look at here at the leaders and challenges, you have Huawei, and again, I don't know how much business Huawei is going to get in North America in the foreseeable future. But you do have your established players, Palo, Fortinet, Cisco, and Checkpoint. And then you come over here to the SD-WAN, and well, first of all, where is Palo? Where is Checkpoint? The only two outside of Huawei that I already talked about that are in here is Fortinet and Cisco. And if you actually look at the publications that come with these slides, you're going to see that there is one main difference between those two. Aside from the obvious that Fortinet is a little higher in the ability to execute, but what Cisco submitted for one is not what they submitted for the other. Whereas with Fortinet, they're using the same boxes. And that to me is a story worth telling. That's very important. That speaks to their ability to be a true multi-purpose device and do it well. The second of this type of slides that I have is from NSS Labs, and this is about TCO. Now, TCO should be something that is very important to your customers and also very important to you, because a lower TCO means that you can offer your services and hopefully make good money from the services that you offered when you're leveraging whatever technology solutions you like to offer in those services. And look at the TCO per megabit per second of Fortinet compared to the rest. And also, while you're doing that, look at the quality of experience of both VoIP and video. Now, Fortinet is right up there with everybody else, a lot higher than some of the other ones when it comes to QoE. And look at the TCO. That's not even remotely close. There's a huge gap between Fortinet and the rest of the players. All right, so that is however many slides we have. So we are going to take the rest of the time to have a walkthrough of the SD-WAN configuration on a FortiGate. So just bear with me for just a moment. All right, so this first part I actually pre-recorded because I was afraid that I may mess it up and actually lost connectivity. So I am going to actually talk over it while the video is playing. So this is a FortiGate 100F, is the model that we have in our lab. And essentially, this is a very simple out-of-the-box configuration where you have both of the WAN interfaces at this time are already connected. I have static IPs. In a real-world scenario, this probably would be really different. In my lab, I don't really have through SD-WAN. What I did is I put a switch in front of the firewall to kind of trick it into thinking that we have SD-WAN. We actually do have an SD-WAN lab in San Jose. So for some of if you guys have questions, you want to take a look at some configuration or do some troubleshooting of different things, we can definitely leverage that lab for that. The very first thing you need to do when you're configuring SD-WAN, obviously you plug in the second, if you're going to do two, right? The second ISP. And then you need to, as you're going to see here, you need to remove the references to any interfaces that are going to form the team in the SD-WAN team. And you do that in the way that I've done it here. Now, in a production environment where you have a lot of rules that are referenced in that interface, an easier thing that you can do, I'm gonna pause the video a little bit, is to find a couple of interfaces that are not in use on the FortiGate, because every interface on the FortiGate is configurable. And configure the team with those two interfaces and then move the WAN one at a time to those interfaces so that you don't lose connectivity. Another very important thing, if you're going to configure SD-WAN and you're going to do some SD-WAN rules, you're going to need to enable both application control and SSL certificate inspection. So as you can see here, I removed the reference to 1.1. So then I'm going to go back to interfaces. Now there's no reference. Go to SD-WAN. And these are things that you should know, okay, about your network. And again, they may be completely different because of the ISPs. As soon as you set that up, you're going to get those pie charts there. And when the interfaces actually come up, or the interface actually comes up, those are going to dynamically change as you're doing that. The second thing, oops, let me go back, is you need to set up a static route. All you need to really configure there is you need to put SD-WAN in the interface. So you did that. Then you go back to your policy, and then you select the SD-WAN interface. And then I think at this point I was taking a water break. So let's see if I can forward a little bit. All right, so the interest of time. So you get the routing table information, and then you're gonna see the static route with the interface team. And then we're going to ping Google public DNS, yes. And all right, we are connected. So setting up SD-WAN, I mean, again, if you have a production environment, you may take a little bit more time actually removing interface references. But how long was that? 2 minutes and 28 seconds? 2 minutes and 28 seconds, and we have SD-WAN set up. Okay, so I am going to close this. Okay. All right, so you're gonna get this warning whenever your FortiGate is actually managed by FortiManager. And I have that for the very last part, so we're gonna take a look at that, but that's okay. For the purpose of this demo, we can just log in, then you also get this. And all that means is if I make changes now, it's gonna be out of configuration with FortiManager. So essentially, then I have to go back to FortiManager and re-import everything. So we have SD-WAN configured. If you look at what's happening now, this is the breakdown of bandwidth, volume, and sessions. So the next thing is to configure SD-WAN rules and look at performance SLAs. So before you do anything here, these are all things that I have configured. You're gonna have this implicit rule here. And this implicit rule is going to have 5 algorithms. Usually for my purpose, the best one is source destination IP. And that essentially means that if I'm going to one IP and then I'm going to another IP, and again, you think of IPs in terms of, when I'm putting stuff in the browser, that all translates to IPs. It's load balancing, all that stuff. Because since I'm the only one generating traffic in this demo, then that's the best way to showcase that. But you also have source IP load balancing. So that essentially means YouTube goes one way, Twitter goes another way. You have sessions, and essentially with sessions, it uses an integer value to assign the weight to each interface. So that means that if I do this, see, it changes the pi. So it's very intuitive. You always know what you're doing. 10, 2, so, right? I think the maximum values on these are 255, and the minimum value is 1 on a lot of these. Spillover for ingress or egress or download, upload. Essentially, this is like having 2 glasses of water. And you say, okay, I'm gonna pour water on glass number 1. When I get to, the glass is 8 ounces. When I get to 6 ounces, I'm gonna start pouring water in the second glass. That's what that is. And then you also have volume, which is the weight. And then I am actually not using this, but I have it here to show you the maximum and minimum values. So if I put this back to 1, it works in this very similar to session. So 1 and 1 means 50-50. So essentially, any traffic that is not governed by these rules will be governed by the implicit rule in the bottom. All right, so next thing you would do is you would do performance SLAs. So performance SLAs allow you to really, it's like setting up health checks and then applying those health checks to interfaces. And then you apply those SLAs to the SD-WAN rules that we saw in the previous screen. So there are some out of the box that you can choose to leverage or not. And then there are some that you can create. Like for example, this one for normal traffic, we are pinging, I believe this is the level 3 DNS, public DNS. And the participant is 1-1. And this is my target. That means that for this interface under this SLA to be labeled as okay to use, these 3 things need to be under these numbers. And then these are the check intervals in milliseconds, yes. So essentially, after 5 bad checks, it's down. After 5 good checks, is good to go. And then by enabling this, it means that you would change the static routes, take the bad route out of the table. Then we have another one for YouTube, very similar, but here we actually have 2 participants. And then the target is a little different. And again, all of these are for purpose of demonstration, just to see what, the different things that you can change. Some of these rules may actually, in a real environment, may be configured totally different. But I just want you guys to see, number 1, how to go about configuring some of these things. And number 2, that it's not that hard. It's not hard at all. So then you take these performance SLAs and you go back to your rules and you create new. And then we have a YouTube rule. And this one here, by the way, in a SD-WAN rule, whatever you don't need, you can leave it blank. Okay, so we have all of YouTube here. And by the way that you do this, when you click on here, you're gonna see a bunch of stuff. So just type YouTube, and then you have all the YouTube in there. And then you just add them. And then you're gonna come down here, and you can set up an interface preference. If you put both in there and they both qualify, then the traffic is going to be round robin among those 2. And then you set up your strategy. So there are different strategies. You have manual, and manual is pretty self-explanatory. If I say manual and I put WAN 2, the traffic is going to go down 1, 2 unless 1, 2 is not there. If I do best quality, right, then you put an SLA, and all the interfaces that you're going to put there are going to be compared to that SLA, and whatever interface has the best metrics is chosen, right? And usually, if they're both equal, which is very difficult, then the primary one, I think the first one that you put in there is chosen. And then the other one is lowest cost. Essentially, that means that, again, it's a different way to look at the SLA, but it looks at all the metrics, and it looks at, even if they're both good, it looks at the one that has the very, very lowest cost and it looks at the numbers that we set up when we set up the performance SLA in your targets, and it chooses that link. So then we have a different rule for Twitter. Here we've chosen manual. And again, you know, you just type in Twitter and it gives you all the things that you want. And a team rule for Microsoft Teams. So what does this give you? This gives you the ability to steer traffic in essentially any way that you want. You can have a primary circuit where you can be a dedicated circuit, and you will be steering your critical applications through that circuit, and then everything else through a different interface in the WAN in the SD-WAN team. You can aggregate for those scenarios where one ISP alone doesn't give you the bandwidth and the throughput that you need. You can aggregate multiple and get, you know, a virtual pipe essentially that is large enough to handle all the water that needs to pass through. You can do other things, that you can limit the ability for, you know, limit the speed so that certain applications like YouTube, for example, don't really take over your network. And we're going to see that. We're going to see that with actually traffic shaping. So here we have traffic shapers, and there are some that are already pre-built. So this is a very simple traffic shaper. Priority, bandwidth, you can select if you want to do it in megabits per second or another metric. Maximum, guaranteed. And then you can see that this is referenced. All right, can't access that from here. But if we look to the policies, we're gonna go to the limit YouTube policy. And then again, we have all the applications there. And here you can select the source. So that can be customized. The destination can also be customized. The time, so during working hours, if you wanna limit YouTube, you can do it. The application obviously is there. Apply traffic shaper to the outgoing interface, and the shaper is that one that we just created. Shared and reversed. You have to put it in both. The other thing that we can do is we can create a traffic shaping profile. So essentially, you can make a profile, and you know, where this pie represents all your bandwidth, and then you can have groups where you can guarantee bandwidth to certain types of traffic. And then you can take this profile and you can create a rule where you can say, okay, I want to apply that profile to HTTP traffic, and I'm going to give HTTP traffic the group 4 value. And if we go back, let me go back because I think I was a little too fast on that. Group 4, guaranteed bandwidth is 10, maximum 25. So that's what we gave that group. So then we take that profile, right? And we are going to assign it to an interface. So I'm just going to pick one at random. I don't have this done because this would significantly affect the performance of this webcast. But essentially, you turn this on, you select the profile, and then you have to turn this on and specify the outbound bandwidth. So those are some of the ways that you can customize the FortiGate to essentially steer the traffic in any way that you want, check the health of the links dynamically. You know, SD-WAN is all about, essentially, you're constantly checking all the avenues that your packages are taking when you're, you know, if you're UPS, and on the fly, if one of those routes becomes unavailable, or you find out that it's full of potholes, you start automatically rerouting stuff the other way. And with the newer generation with the F series of the FortiGate, Fortinet recognizes that more and more of the traffic is encrypted. So the new chips that they have are all about being able to perform faster and being able to inspect encrypted traffic faster in an SD-WAN environment. So the last thing I want to show you is the SD-WAN management from FortiManager. And by the way, for those of you guys who have a lot of customers that are sending people to work remote, Fortinet is a great technology for remote workforce. This is the SSL web portal. And essentially what's happening here is that I'm going out to the internet through one FortiGate, going back, right back through the other one, because the rest of the network is behind that other FortiGate. So this is my SSL VPN portal, and here I have some shortcuts, including FortiManager. So I'm gonna log into that. Strong passwords. Okay, so if you guys are familiar with FortiManager, you know some of these tabs. These ones, however, are here because I don't know if you guys know, but FortiManager also has FortiAnalyzer features. So if you come to settings and you turn this on, then now your FortiManager is also a FortiAnalyzer. Essentially means that you can do login and reporting. Now, you are going to have significantly lower amounts of login allowed than a dedicated FortiAnalyzer. But if you have an opportunity, an environment where management is more important, but you still like to have some centralized logging, you can certainly do that with FortiManager. So let's go to device management. And what I want to show you here is the SD-WAN management. So essentially, and imagine I only have one, but you could have 10, 20, 50, 100 FortiGates, and they would all show up in the single pane of class. So essentially, when you click on here, you see all the screens that we saw on the FortiGate as I was taking you through the interface part, then the performance SLAs, and then the rules. All of that stuff is here. You have your interface members, health check service, and those are essentially just the performance SLAs. And then the monitor. And the monitor, you know, think about a multi-site project, your ability to just log into this thing and see, okay, I have 90 sites, everything is green, I'm good to go. So, you know, just that simple. I mean, there's more to it than that, but the first thing to just have peace of mind is logging in here and say, hey, everything is green. So then here you would have all your different ones. Again, I just have one down here in my bunker in Miami. So if you hover over this, you're gonna get the metrics on your performance SLAs that are applied to that interface. Then 1 and 2, same thing. You can go to the table view. And then you're also gonna get by application. So green means you're good to go. Why is this gray? If you guys were paying attention, and I know that sometimes I go a little fast because I don't wanna go over, but the Twitter rule was manual. So when it's manual, you don't really have an SLA because you chose the manual SD-WAN rule. So that's why this is gray. It's not applicable. So then I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to see 10 minutes worth of data about the traffic. Summary, bandwidth, traffic. Obviously, why are these empty? Because I'm not using the FortiGuard, the Gmail, the Google, the Office, but these I'm using. So you can see the metrics for latency, jitter, and packet loss. And then on the YouTube SLA, same thing. And then if we go to the reports, so you would get this if you have if you're either doing this, where you enabled the FortiAnalyzer features in FortiManager, or if you have a dedicated FortiAnalyzer, it's the same thing. FortiAnalyzer is all about analysis and reporting. So this is the secure SD-WAN report. These are all the metrics that you can get information about. And I apologize ahead of time. My report is not going to be very extensive because this is not a real corporate environment. But you do have metrics with regards to your SD-WAN rules. Well, there's a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube. There's a lot of really good Fortinet videos on YouTube, especially the ones from this company called Exclusive Networks. They have a really nice YouTube channel. So SD-WAN rules, service utilization, application, session, and then again, it repeats for all the applications where I have rules. So these reports are fully customizable, but out of the box, it gives you a ton of data that you can send to your customer, to the administrators, so that they can look at what's going on. And obviously, you can do this for one device or for a multitude of devices, all the ones that you have under FortiManager remote management. Okay, so I am going to actually go back to the slides. So Fortinet as a service. If you have talked to us in the past few months, obviously, we are really driving home the point of hardware as a service with Fortinet. Fortinet has a really good program, especially for those partners that are, like, for example, I know that they changed the partnership level names, but I am going to continue to call it, forgive me, Fortinet, continue to call it Silver Partners. In order for you guys to compete and get higher discounts, you can leverage Fortinet as a service. And then this slide, we were at an event not long ago, and we had this slide showing, and a lot of the people that came over, they kept repeating essentially the same thing. It was like, oh, I didn't know that Fortinet had so many things. It's true that people think about Fortinet, and still to this point, to this date, they think about the FortiGate. Well, yes, the FortiGate is the backbone of Fortinet. So when I talk about Fortinet, I use the New England Patriots as a comparison, because the New England Patriots had a really strong backbone, and that was Tom Brady. And then after that, they had a team around it that, if you look at those players individually at their positions, some of them were probably not the best, but together, New England was in the playoffs every year and in the Super Bowl almost every year. So I have actually played team sports, and through my formerly I was in the military, so that was probably one of the best team experiences anybody could ever had. What really makes a team, and not just a bunch of guys running around, is the ability for the pieces of that team to communicate. And if you've seen some of the other webinars that we have shown, and if you've been in conversations with me and other members of our team, we really drive that point home about how the fabric components, they talk to each other through telemetry, and you can do automation stitches so that if any component sees something, it screams to everybody, and you can enforce rules on another device. That is really what sets Fortinet apart from other vendors that have a bunch of technologies that they're doing their own thing. They're not talking to one another. So essentially that means that you have holes. And that's why they have this graphic. Every time you see any Fortinet publication, you log into a website, they have this, it's kind of like a web, because what sets them apart is how well they communicate and they integrate with one another. I mean, the FortiGate is a switch controller, it's an AP controller, so any of that's plugged in behind it can be controlled, and then you can filter that traffic from the FortiGate. if you are offering any kind of security managed services, and you're thinking about, even if you are or you are not thinking about hardware as a service, you should be seriously considering Fortinet. Because I promise you that if you do, you will be successful. And that is all I have. I'm gonna hand it over back to Chris.
Thanks, Juan. So, as Juan mentioned, I encourage everyone to take advantage of those Fortinet resources. The partner portal has a wealth of knowledge on all Fortinet products and solutions. And if you don't quite find what you're looking for, please contact us and we'll help you any way we can. And for our vendors, as you may know, we are Fortinet's #1 worldwide distributor, but we do offer products and solutions from our other vendors, and they all integrate with Fortinet quite well. So that's basically it for this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us on this SD-WAN webinar. And we look forward to speaking to you soon, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Yes.
Take care, everyone.
Stay safe, please. And if you're bored, just call me. I'm here. We can talk about Fortinet.
Right. He's got a
Have a good
bunker
one.
that he needs to use. So
Yes.
let him know.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.